Great. Okay.
Oh,
I hope this
all
will
right.
work.
All right. So I'm taking a distance learning course that prepares educators to teach online,
Okay.
and we're talking about the various softwares that would work in the educational setting. And I thought of Zorap because there are many times that we want to have a collaborative setting where the entire class can come
Yep.
to be instructed. They have some products and platforms now, but in my opinion, Zorap was ideal. It didn't require a lot of setup, and it was able to host a large amount of people
Right.
clearly, and we were able to share different media. So, I guess we can start with who is Barry Spencer?
What was that last part?
Who is Barry Spencer?
Oh, who is Barry Spencer? Well, let's see. Well, that's a complicated question. I'm a software guy. I've been doing software since I was like 12. That was 1971, writing programs and stuff. And I'm an inventor too. My family has a kind of history of inventing things. My grandfather, who I'm named after, he actually invented the microwave oven, and he invented really kind of the key technology for radar at the end of World War II. So his name was Percy Spencer, and my name is Percy Spencer, and I think I got a lot of, kind of suggestions that I should invent stuff when I was a kid, so I sort of went off in that direction, I guess. I'm actually a college dropout. I was only in college for a year. I kind of got bored, and the technology they had in college was sort of behind what they had in the industry. So I left college, and really I started working since I was 19. When I was 19, and really I've been working ever since. I started a few companies, little companies. I started a company back in 1993 that was really cool. It was a company I'm sorry, maybe it was 97. No, I think it was 93. I started a little company, and I had created this technology that lets people interact with computers using a video camera as the interface. So if you can picture it in your head, what you do is you'd point the camera at yourself and you'd see yourself on the screen. But you'd also see other things on the screen that weren't actually in the room. But if you move, it'll look like you're actually interacting with those things. So like we had a volleyball game and different little sports games for kids to play. And, the idea behind that was, to get kids, a little bit active while they're playing video games. So, they actually have to move their body around and stuff like that. That was really, really exciting. I mean, as an entrepreneur, it doesn't get any more exciting than that. We got a lot of press, and I was in Fortune magazine, and it was one of those, sort of California startup stories. It started in my garage, and I only had 4 people, including myself, and that was very, very exciting, and that really got me, really kind of hooked on the entrepreneurial thing. That company got a little complicated because, I got investors involved, and at some point they owned more of the company than I did, and they started making decisions that I didn't necessarily agree with. But one of the decisions they made, which I went along with, was to shift the focus for that company from doing, this interactive kind of game technology that used a video camera. And they thought we should maybe go off in this video chat direction. So this is before Zorap. And this was actually right around the year 2000. Me and my team, we developed, I think it was probably the first video chat site on the internet.
Wow.
It was called SEESAW. And it was kind of a
Spell
funny...
that.
SEESAW, it's just SEESAW.
Oh, SEESAW.
Yep, SEESAW. And it was kind of funny. We were very excited about it, and we had tested it, and it was very, very cool. You could have a whole bunch of people in a room, sort of like Zorap, but not nearly as good, of course. And you could see each other and talk to each other and all that sort of thing, and it was free, and it was pretty easy to set up. So anyway, we launched this thing, and on the day that it launched, I'm like talking to my sister and my in-laws and my family on this thing, and all of a sudden some naked guy comes into the room, and we're like, who's that guy? And then somebody else, some other naked person comes into the room, and then I don't think my sister talked to me for like 6 months after that. But we learned, actually back then, if you give people video cameras and just kind of this anonymous sort of setup, I guess the natural thing people want to do is get naked on the camera.
Yeah.
So, that was, that was fun. So we continued with SEESAW for a little while. We had another version that was more for companies. I forgot what that was called. I think it was eventually called Viditel. But anyway, with all the changes in direction that the company had over those years, it was kind of frustrating, but it was also a real educational experience because we were getting kind of pushed and motivated to do better and more exciting things. But at some point I had kind of had enough and I decided to leave. At that time I was living in Santa Cruz, California. I'm originally from Boston, and I've been in California for about 16 years at that point. And I decided that I really needed a break from Silicon Valley because I was totally burnt out. It's running a startup is pretty challenging, and there's a lot of hours involved. And at that point, I think, I had been sort of in startup mode for like 7 or 8 years, and that was just too much. I just needed to.
And this is still before Zorap.
Yes, this is just before Zorap. Yeah. So actually, what I did is I packed up a moving truck with all our stuff and drove to the other end of the country. I drove to Maine, and we actually built a house there. We moved there. I'm from Boston originally, so Maine isn't really that, strange, I guess. And then I kind of chilled out for a few months, and then I started thinking about what I was going to work on next. And I used really all the lessons from those previous experiences with video chat and video conferencing, and I think we had 6 or 7 different technologies we had come out with back then at the previous company. And I took all those things that I had learned and decided to create something else, and that became Zorap. And Zorap was actually written just by myself and a guy named Jeremy. And so it was an ultra small startup. We only had 2 people. Whereas the other things that I developed, we had a team of 30 or 40 people working on it. So this was a very small team. I got some investment from somebody who had funded the company before, before Zorap. And so the basic idea with Zorap was to make it just super easy. The vision was basically, if you can browse to a web page and you can get your friends to browse to the same web page, then you'll be able to see each other and share things and talk to each other and that sort of thing. And not, try not to make it, make the installation very complicated, and, have it work on pretty much everything. So super easy, browser oriented, because a lot of the video conferencing technology out there, they kind of assume that you are sort of a technologist to begin with.
Right.
But, we didn't want to do that. We wanted to have it super simple. I guess it took about 2 or 3 years before it was actually, pretty stable and pretty usable. So one of the things that we did, usually these little high-tech companies, they have, like QA organizations, quality assurance, people that, will test the product for you and find bugs and that sort of thing. And what we did with Zorap is we knew we didn't have testers, so we tried really hard to write, software that was, very reliable and, didn't crash or anything like that. And the other thing we did is we really tried to interact with the users and, find out, well, what's this experience like for them?
You came in on one of my sessions, I remember.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember that. Yep. Yeah, I do remember that. So we were trying to get feedback. We get a lot of, great feedback from people.
Yeah.
One of the harder things to support, one of the harder things to do is to support everybody's computers, because computers are all very different. And everybody has different headsets, and they have their speakers placed in different ways and microphones placed in different areas and stuff. And to make the software work with all those different possible configurations was pretty challenging. And usually that's what we would use a bigger group of people for, to have them work on, specific, setups. If you have an HP desktop computer and you're using Bose speakers and a, desktop microphone, that's there's software specifically for, setups like that. So,
Right.
And, to make it simple, you don't want to have the user try to figure out what the problems are. Like one of the problems that was really difficult to deal with is this echo problem.
Right.
Where you talk and you hear yourself coming back. And
Right.
that's a huge problem, because if you hear yourself coming back like half a second later, it's totally distracting and it's really hard to have a conversation at all.
Right.
And usually people think, well, I'm experiencing echo, so it must be something I'm doing wrong. But actually, if you're in a room with like 10 people, it could be any one of it's not your computer, it's someone else's computer is creating the echo.
Right.
So that was one of the more difficult,
And I think you put instructions for us to just have everybody mute. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Mute.
or use a headset, really.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't like using headsets because they look goofy or they mess up your hair or whatever.
Yeah.
So, and it's not a natural sort of thing. So, anyway, so Zorap was working great. We did all sorts of things. We had like a Facebook, plug-in so you could have a Facebook page, and You know, you could Zorap enable that. We also did a thing with, oh, I forgot the name of it. One of the music sites. So you could go and, you know, have a video, video chat with people around a particular topic. So, you know, another part of the vision was that we'd be able to use this technology not just on our website, but on other people's websites. So, you know, if you had a, you know, like a social network or something, that you could have your own, you know, Zorap room or Zorap page on your social network.
And that's what I did. I had several networks and had built the two networks up to maybe 2,000 to 3,000 people, and we had a page on the menu where Zorap room, and people would go in and create their own private Zorap room because Ning offered that option. And then we also had a Zorap room specifically for that network. And we invited guests like the DeBarge singers and things like that, and people would have to register to go in the room. So it was wonderful, I thought.
Oh, that's great. That's great. It's good to hear. Well, you know, another thing that we did is we tried to keep people kind of in their own little groups and not have like one global set of rooms that people could go into.
Right.
Which, you know, it's good because you can have private conversations with just the people you want to talk to, and you don't have these naked people walking in all the time.
Right.
But it's not good from the perspective of, you know, being viral. You know, if you have a website and you go there and there isn't something immediately to do, a lot of people just go off and, you know, don't think about it again.
Right.
So we couldn't really say we were like a video chat site because there was no specific, you know, destination that you could go if you weren't, you know, if you weren't already in a group. Like if you weren't in a Ning network that didn't, you know, that had a Zorap page set up already, you know, and you just went to our website, you know, you could create a room and you would just sit there by yourself.
Right, right.
And a lot of people.
Which happened often.
Oh, it was crazy. Actually, we used to track user minutes, and for a long time, you know, like well over half of the user minutes were spent by people in rooms by themselves.
Right.
And actually, I got a few people saying, you know, this is great because I can go into a room and I can play music and do all this stuff, and they didn't realize they didn't realize that it was intended for groups of people, not just an individual.
Right. What?
So you know, there's that whole. Anyway, you know, it worked out. I think it worked out, you know, pretty good. We had people segregated, you know, into their own little interest groups, and you know, you wouldn't get strangers walking in. So,
I tried to create a network, and in fact, I did create it, and I had it all set up with a whole lot of different rooms, and the network was called Up Close Live, and basically you could join the network and register to see, and I was going to invite different groups, you know, and they would have a chance to go in there and actually see them perform, maybe, you know, a little mini concert up close.
Yeah.
At the top of them, yeah. So, let me ask you this. You gave me some strengths, you gave me some weaknesses of Zorap. In technical terms, what components make up Zorap? Is it considered a platform, an application, software, hardware? And is it open source code?
Well, Zorap, the actual software is there's software that runs on our servers. So we have, you know, well, we had a data center that had a whole bunch of servers in it, and that was kind of, you know, if it's like a hub and spoke sort of, if you think of it as there's a, you know, central point everybody's media goes through, that's on the server. And then there's client-side software, which we had a few different browser plugins. And, so what those do is, they extend the functionality of the browser, so you can have your own software running inside the browser. And what the different pieces of software did, the client software was responsible for, communicating with the server, for monitoring how much bandwidth you had, and not, trying not to exceed that. And it was also responsible for managing your devices, and also providing the user interface. So, the client software is really about your system and, your participation in the conference. And then the servers themselves were pretty interesting. It was, kind of like a phone company. Basically, you would have, this sort of secret identifier for your particular room, that you wanted to go into. And you would, basically use these servers to connect to that. The servers would have that room in it. And so what would happen is your media would get sent to the server, your video stream and your audio stream, and I don't know, if you're sharing a video or something, that gets sent to the server, and then it gets distributed to all the other participants. So it's kind of like this, telephone exchange thing, or I don't know what you call it exactly, but it was we called it media agnostic, because we could put any kinds of media through the server. Like, we didn't have to change the server when we started sharing music.
Okay.
We didn't have to change it when we started sharing video. The server didn't have to know about what kind of media it was. It just knew that it was media. Usually, what happens is people will write, like a video server, which is all about video and audio. And then if you want to add a new type of media, you have to do a lot of work to change the server. So this, because we really wanted to support any kind of media that might come along, including pictures and that sort of thing, we just made the server, very generic. I guess, one other kind of major component to it, which is probably not at all obvious, it's a big thing that's behind the scenes, and it's this, bandwidth management piece. So
say that again.
It's bandwidth management.
Dandruff?
Bandwidth, B-A-N-D, bandwidth, like...
bandwidth, okay.
Yeah. So, everybody's internet connection is different, like, some people have fast ones, some people have slow ones, some people have ones that have a lot of, packet loss, errors and that sort of thing. And the software has to be able to handle all those different conditions. And in order to handle all those conditions, it has to know what the conditions are. So 20 times every second, the software would basically figure out what your conditions are. And then if you have, less bandwidth than you used to have, then we'll start sending less video than we used to send. You might see the video quality become, a little bit more fuzzy, or you might see less frames per second, that sort of thing. But in order to keep the conversation low latency, and maybe I should explain low latency, but in order to keep it low latency, we had to do a really good job managing bandwidth. So.
Okay.
Anyway, so what latency is I mean, this is like one of the biggest things you have to deal with if you're doing one of these communication things. Latency is basically the delay or, the lag between when you talk and when somebody else can hear you. And on the telephone, like this conversation here, there's very little latency, So when I talk, you hear it pretty much instantly, even though you're across the country. I'm in San Francisco. But if you're communicating on the internet, there can be a lot of latency. In some cases, it might take a second or longer, for you to hear it. So the software did a lot of things to keep that latency low, to keep it, to keep the communication live and sort of natural. Because when you're talking to someone in person, there isn't any latency. As soon as you talk, they can hear you. But if instead you talk and they hear you a second later, it's really distracting. That's when people start talking at the same time and that sort of thing.
Right.
So, anyway, yeah, and there was also, I guess, a third piece of software. So there was a server, the client, and then there was the user interface was mostly in Java. And that's like so most of the software is written in C++. So the client and the server were written in C++, and the user interface was in Java. And the reason why we did that is so that we could create different user interfaces for different applications. Like if you wanted to have a room where you had a concert going on, maybe you wanted to have a really big window for, to show the concert and little tiny windows for the participants. And maybe you're not going to have text chat or something like that. So, we wanted the user interface to be really flexible so we could change it for different venues. But mostly people just use the one sort of standard user interface. Anyway, that's the software. Those are the software pieces.
So is that, and this may not make sense technically, I don't know, but was that the Zorap code considered open source? I mean, it's not available to any and everybody.
Yeah, it wasn't open source.
Okay. Well, SEESAW must have been, because that was the first, and now everybody's doing it.
Yeah, actually, SEESAW wasn't either. People basically, created competitors.
Yeah.
But open source is really is difficult to do if you have investors.
Right.
And because investors want to own whatever it is that you're doing.
Exactly. Right.
So
will Zorap ever come back, or is that it for Zorap?
I don't know. I'd like Zorap to come back, but I don't think it probably, I don't think it will unless I do something else like that again.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I can't actually tell you what happened to Zorap because I have a contract with a company where I can't really talk about it.
Yeah, you told me that a while ago, a couple of years ago, and so every time I look at that type of technology, I wonder if it's Zorap.
Yeah.
To be honest, I was like, so is this Zorap? But how could we use? Well, that's kind of self-explanatory. The question would be, how could Zorap be incorporated into the educational environment, or how could it be implemented in schools?
You mean how could it have been if Zorap was still around? Or?
Yeah, how could it have been?
Oh, yeah. So,
especially now, it's a lot of online schools.
Yeah, Zorap would have been perfect for online schools because we built it so that you can have a meeting in, what we called a context. So a Facebook page, would be a particular context, or a Ning site would be a particular context. And it was super easy for us to add any context to, for a room. So if you had a online website and you had, a page or, a chat group or something that was associated with a particular class, particular course or whatever, you could, we could just, make a Zorap room for that context.
After 50, what happens? After 50 people, because Zorap went up to 50. Is it just that the quality was bad, or?
Well, I'm sorry, what? I didn't hear what you said.
After 50 people, of course, no classroom would have more than 50 people, but
I see. Yeah,
hosts up to 50 people.
Yeah, we used to say 50 people, mostly because the user interface was built around 50 people, but we could support hundreds of people. Actually, it's just that what would happen is if you had 200 people on the screen, you'd have these teeny tiny windows, and it was kind of bizarre. So what you usually do in a situation like that is, well, what I used to do in my previous endeavors when there was, a huge number of people, is we used to have a sort of a set of windows that was on the screen, like maybe 8 windows, and then we would prioritize a set of windows that was on the screen, like maybe 8 windows, and then we would prioritize people, so the most active participants would be in those windows. And,
okay.
And so it would switch. So if you started talking, you would show up. It was kind of like a panel discussion where all you had to do was talk in order to get on the panel.
Okay.
So
on the rooms that we hosted, a lot of people didn't even want to be seen, so we had a lot of little gray icons.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, and that works out really well. It works out great because you don't have to take up screen space if you're not sharing your video.
Right. So what I'm going to do, Barry, if you could send me the recording of what you have.
Sure.
I'm going to try to make a completed package, and I'll send it back to you. But I know, in my opinion, and now that I even know that, you come from a large family of inventors, and that you were actually the first inventor of unsung hero, in my opinion.
Oh, that's sweet.
But we're going to create this report. It would become a part of Liberty University's property once you submit it. So, but I want to show you what I've put together, and you can tell me yay or no as far as, whether you want it to become a part of Liberty University's library.
I was on a flight a few months ago, and I was sitting next to a student from Liberty University, and she was one of the nicest, most eloquent teenagers I've ever met. She was just. And my son is he's just turned 20. He's in college, and I was thinking, man, I wish he was going to Liberty University, because it's unbelievable what goes on at some of these colleges. The stories from him are just unbelievable. It's like almost like mandatory drinking at some of these campuses. So anyway, I'd be very happy for this to become part of Liberty University's.
Okay. So I think more people should know about Barry Spencer.
Oh, you're so nice.
But thank you so very much. You are very gracious and just very kind to have spent this time with me. And if you could send that to me, I'm going to put that together and send it back to you.
Sure. What's your email
And
address?
WILLIAMSIDY, Williams with the S on the end, IDY, Williams Ivy, at hotmail.com.